Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started.
Gravitas, presented by Amity University, ranked amongst the top 3% universities globally. Skoda, superb, best in next class. Co-powered by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist.
Have you heard of something called the Mandela effect? It's when a large group of people share a false memory, a common false memory, like people believing that Nelson Mandela died in a prison in the 80s when in fact he died much later at his home. Now there's no logical explanation for why people share a false memory or subscribe to a wrong theory, but it's more common than you would imagine. And now China may be trying to achieve the same effect. In the not-so-distant future, a large number of people sharing a false memory. Something like this: the Wuhan virus did not originate in Wuhan. It was in the epicenter. The virus came from elsewhere. China just fought and defeated it. This is what Beijing wants the world to believe. And it may be successful with the able assistance of the World Health Organization. They sent a team to China for a month to probe the origins of the virus. Today they shared their findings, or the fact that they found nothing new. A very long press conference was held to make a very short point. China may not be guilty. The probe is work in progress. When the investigation began, we told you not to hold your breath for the outcome. Tonight on Gravitas, we'll tell you why expecting anything else was expecting too much. Also on the show, a phone conversation between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Joe Biden. What was discussed and what's next on their agenda? We'll discuss that. China continues to test the waters and push the boundaries, quite literally. Chinese vessels near Japan's Senkaku Islands have caused tension. France sends its submarine in South China Sea. We'll tell you what's cooking there. Afghanistan is dealing with twin challenges: terrorists from Pakistan and the virus from China. India is offering a helping hand. Prime Minister Modi speaks to President Ashraf Ghani. And in the US, a case of water hacking in Florida. What does that even mean, water hacking? And who did it? The FBI is investigating. We'll tell you all about it. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
31 bodies have been recovered as search operations continued in the Indian state of Uttarakhand after a glacier burst left nearly 200 missing. Rescue teams have been racing against time to reach those still stuck and worked overnight to remove the debris and slush. The Tokyo Olympics Organizing Committee is set to convene a special board meeting after nearly 400 volunteers quit over sexist remarks by committee president Yoshihiro Mori. Mori has come under fire for saying that meetings with female members take a long time with each other. He apologized and retracted his comments, but the outrage over the comments has been growing. At least 24 people were killed after heavy rain flooded an illegal underground textile workshop at a private house in the Moroccan port city of Tangiers. Hong Kong's top court has denied bail to media tycoon and Beijing critic Jimmy Lai, who is the most high-profile person to be charged under the city's national security law. Lai has been in custody since the 3rd of December. Apple's contract manufacturer Wistron has said it is looking to restart operations at its plant in the southern Indian state of Karnataka. Large-scale rehiring after extensive background checks by local police is now underway. Bitcoin extended gains on Tuesday to a record high after Tesla invested $1.5 billion in the cryptocurrency. Bitcoin has more than doubled over 2 months. The leap after Tesla's announcement was its biggest daily rise in more than 3 years. Turkish authorities are investigating the appearance of a mysterious monolith in southeastern Turkey. The metal block was found by a farmer in Sanliurfa province with Old Turkic script that reads, "Look at the sky, see the moon." Police officers were looking through CCTV footage and investigating vehicles that may have transported the monolith. Heavy snow covered Berlin in a blanket of white, partly freezing water in canals and hampering traffic movement. Hundreds of vehicles were stuck on the A2 highway in western Germany. Train services were also partially cancelled in several regions as snowplows were working around the clock to free the tracks of ice and snow. England have ended India's 12-match winning streak at home with an emphatic 227-run win in the Chennai Test. The visitors needed only 1.5 sessions to pick up 9 wickets on the final day. Jack Leach bagged 4 scalps while James Anderson wrecked the middle order with 3 wickets as India were bowled out for 192. Victory sees England go top of the ICC World Test Championship standings while India fall to 4th place. Women's world number 1 Ashley Barty has marked herself as a favourite for the Australian Open title with a stunning 6-love drubbing of Danka Kovanic in round 1. Defending champion Sophia Kenin survived a stern test from Australian wildcard Madison Inglis on day 2. But 2-time winner Victoria Azarenka crashed out after a 7-5, 6-4 upset to American Jessica Pegula. Men's world number 2 Rafael Nadal and 4th seed Daniel Medvedev are through to the second round.
The Wuhan virus jumped from animals to humans. It wasn't artificially engineered, and the pandemic probably began in December 2019. Is any of this even news? Apparently it is. If you ask the World Health Organization, this is the path-breaking finding of a month-long investigation. The conclusions of the WHO team in Wuhan. The pandemic probably began in December 2019. We would have never known had the WHO not enlightened us. They spent 1 whole month almost, and they found no answers. The probe on the origin of the virus has failed to establish the origin. Apparently, it's still work in progress. Good luck, we say, because it's already too late to find clues or data in China. That's because China is leading the investigation. China is controlling the probe into China's role in the pandemic. You heard that right. How does that even work? It doesn't, which is why the probe has no answers. It is not working. Beijing has been dictating the terms of this investigation from the word go. Chinese scientists have led the critical parts of the probe. And now China has got the WHO to say what it has. On Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you how China has hijacked this investigation and how the world has played a mute witness throughout. Let's start with what happened in Wuhan today. Pretty dramatic. The WHO team has wrapped up its investigation. They leave Wuhan tomorrow, but they're leaving empty-handed after keeping the international media at a distance for weeks. The WHO team was finally supposed to speak to the press today. They were supposed to reveal what they found, or parts of what they found. But even here, China was calling the shots. According to one reporter's account in Wuhan, there was total chaos 12 hours before the scheduled press conference. First, the World Health Organization sent out emails to journalists, inviting them for this press conference. Then the Chinese Foreign Ministry intervened. Officials said no press conference had been planned. They don't like talking to the press anyway. Then the local government in Wuhan called the journalists for a press conference of their own, and they said it will happen at a different time, different from the original WHO press conference. And this one will not be streamed online. As we said, total chaos. Finally, the World Health Organization and Chinese officials decided to hold a joint press conference. They appeared together before the press. And once again, China was in charge. It was Chinese officials who got the bulk of the speaking time. The scientists leading the Chinese team presented the findings, and not a member of the WHO team. The Chinese scientists told the press two key findings. One, the source of the virus is still unclear. And two, there is not enough evidence to determine if the virus was spreading in Wuhan before December 2019. Listen to this.
The SARS-CoV-2 may have originated from zoonotic transmission, but the reservoir hosts remain to be identified. There is no indication of the transmission of the SARS-CoV-2 in the population in the period before December 2019. There is not enough evidence to determine whether there was spread of SARS-CoV-2 in Wuhan before that time.
So the source and the spread, these are the two key questions that could determine how the pandemic began and how it spread the world over. But the WHO team says there is not enough evidence to answer any of these questions, the source or the spread. Perhaps the only thing that they're sure about is the lab theory. Did this virus come from a lab? Was it engineered in a lab and unleashed on the world? Or did it accidentally leak from a facility where scientists could have been conducting tests on other samples? This probe team, so-called probe team of the WHO, rules out this theory, and they will not be looking into it in the future.
However, the findings suggest that the laboratory incident hypothesis is extremely unlikely and to explain the introduction of the virus into the human population, and therefore is not a hypothesis that will implies to suggest future studies into our work to support our future work into the understanding of the origin of the virus.
It did not come from a lab, they say. The scientific community has largely discredited these claims. The WHO investigators did not say anything new, really. So the question now is, what are they going to do next? How does this team plan to proceed? Which facts will form the foundation of this investigation going forward? There are three important conclusions that they have presented before the world. One, that the virus is natural in origin, not man-made, not lab-made. Two, the virus jumped from animals to humans. Which animals, they don't know. Or it could have spread from frozen wildlife to wildlife foods. These are the two theories on the origins that the investigators will now look into. That last bit is very important, the theory that the virus spreads from frozen foods, because China has been aggressively pushing this very claim. Even when scientists remain unconvinced, this is what China told the world. Until now, the WHO has been caught in a battle between China and the West. Until last month, Beijing wanted the WHO to accept that the virus spreads from frozen food packaging. It had even shared the draft of a new advisory with the Wall Street Journal, only to withdraw it later. Apparently, this draft was not cleared, and sharing it was a mistake. The United States, the European Union, and several other governments have disputed China's claims. Then why does Beijing keep pushing them? By blaming frozen foods, China could argue that the pandemic never really began in Wuhan. China could claim that it may have been imported from elsewhere. In fact, China is already doing all of this by calling on the WHO to investigate the origins of the virus in other countries. While this probe was still underway, Chinese diplomats pushed conspiracy theories. They blamed America for the pandemic. It began with a statement from Beijing. A Chinese diplomat was asked about the Wuhan laboratory, and she responded by asking America to open up its Fort Detrick military lab to WHO investigators.
If the US media can do reports, why can't the Chinese media or ordinary Chinese people express their views on social media?
And since that statement was made, Chinese diplomats have only pushed this claim more aggressively. China's ambassador to the United States gave an interview recently. He was asked if China has been transparent. And he answered this question with two more questions. He asked if America will give access to WHO investigators. He even suggested that the World Health Organization team visit the US next. The Chinese diplomat says the virus should now be traced all over the world. Now, this conspiracy theory has taken a life of its own, with the Chinese state and the press calling on the WHO to dispatch experts to the rest of the world. Probe everyone is what they're saying. Even when the WHO team believes that the virus could have spread from vendors selling products from farms, a reference to the wet markets of China. Beijing has decided the terms for this WHO investigation. Now it is writing its future course in an effort to shift the world's attention away from what happened in Wuhan. But why is the WHO playing ball? What about the World Health Organization? It will leave Wuhan with more questions than answers and serious major holes in its reports. The press conference made no mention of the whistleblowers who warned about the outbreak in China first. Neither did the investigators meet the families of the victims, those who have been trying to sue Chinese officials for their cover-up. Our next report tells you how China dictated the terms for this investigation.
A probe into the virus origins or a stage-managed investigation to vindicate China? Since the idea was first floated, the probe into the origins of the Wuhan virus has faced a crisis of credibility, for more reasons than one. More than 100 countries cleared this investigation last year in May. But China is the one that controlled it. For months, the WHO was negotiating the terms of access with China. It allowed Chinese scientists to lead the key parts of the inquiry. All that the WHO experts could do was review Chinese studies. They were not allowed to gather facts on the ground themselves. The negotiations went on until the end of 2020. Finally, the investigators flew to China. Beijing denied them entry. What followed was a rare rebuke from Dr. Tedros, the director of the World Health Organization, the man who had praised China's response to the pandemic.
Over the past 24 hours, members of the international scientific team on COVID-19 virus origins began traveling from their home countries to China. Today, we learned that Chinese officials have not yet finalized the necessary permissions for the team's arrival in China. I'm very disappointed with this news, given that 2 members had already begun their journeys and others were not able to travel at the last minute.
The experts finally got access in January. Upon their arrival, the team was placed under quarantine for 2 weeks. They finally got down to work by the end of January. Once again, China was dictating the terms. The itinerary was allegedly cleared by Chinese authorities. For a week, the experts were whisked around Wuhan, with China's foreign ministry officials, local government staff, security guards, and officers in plain clothes shadowing the entire team. The international press was kept at a distance. The team had several stopovers at Wuhan. This included the first hospitals that treated the patients, the lab of China's Center for Disease Control and Prevention in Wuhan, the Wuhan wet market that China has kept shut since last year, and the controversial Wuhan Institute of Virology. The place that had allegedly disappeared from the Baidu maps in China. In the weeks leading up to the visit from the WHO team, amid the serious doubts about the credibility of this probe, one of the investigators tried to reassure the skeptics.
We're looking forward to meeting with all the key people here and asking all the important questions that need to be asked.
China's objectives with the probe were quite clear. It wanted to use the opportunity to shift what the world believes, that Wuhan is the original epicenter of this pandemic. The WHO team was taken on a tour of propaganda exhibition that celebrates China's recovery from the pandemic. One that makes no mention of how China tried to muzzle critics and whistleblowers in the early days. Experts watching the probe unfold from a distance criticise China, claiming that meaningful access is being denied to the investigators. This included the new US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken.
Do you think that China needs to be held accountable for not being open about the COVID-19 when it first hit?
There's no doubt that, especially when COVID-19 first hit, but even today, China is falling far short of the mark.
The embarrassing delay in starting the investigation, Beijing's tight grip over the visit, and the limitations placed on fieldwork has tainted the WHO probe. The WHO team is leaving China with more questions than answers. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Now let me tell you a story. Set in the land of cover-ups, the world knows it as China. 13 months back, a mysterious virus emerged in a Chinese city, Wuhan. Some said the virus was natural and originated at a seafood market. Some others said it was man-made. It was manufactured in a lab. Its origin remains a mystery to this day. 13 months, no answers. But there's been a lot of blame game. For a while, the Chinese state media blamed American soldiers for bringing the virus to Wuhan. Then they shifted the blame to Italy, claiming that there was evidence to show that a 4-year-old Italian boy had contracted the virus in November 2019. Then they trained their guns on India. The Indian subcontinent might be the place where the earliest human-to-human transmission occurred, said the Chinese state media. It did not stop there. China tried to pin the blame on a host of other countries, Greece, the Czech Republic, Russia, Serbia, you name it. China blamed everyone and their grandmother. Everyone except the Chinese state, its unhygienic markets and its unnatural experiments on the virus. And all this while, it blocked access to everyone. It refused to let the world investigate the virus's origins. China never wanted this investigation. When Australia pushed for a probe, do you know what China did? It blamed Australia as the source of the virus. The Chinese state media said Australian seafood imports brought the virus to Wuhan. That's probably the theory that the WHO may be also looking at now. The Chinese regime began punishing Australia. The Chinese ambassador asked the citizens of his country to boycott everything Australian. Hu Shijin, the editor of Global Times, wrote, Australia is a bit like chewing gum stuck on the sole of China's shoes. Sometimes you have to find a stone to rub it off. The Chinese labelled Australia chewing gum stuck on a shoe, and they treated it like one. Australian journalists received threats. Chinese propagandists threatened ABC journalist Bang Xiao's family with rape. The Chinese regime imposed stringent measures on Australian products. This included tariffs of up to 200% on wine imported from Australia. But Australia did not budge. China had to give in. It reluctantly agreed to a global investigation. It continued to drag its feet, though, set up more roadblocks. After much back and forth that we have been reporting on, a team of experts from the World Health Organization finally arrived in Wuhan on the 14th of January. Only to be put in quarantine for 2 weeks. Apparently, 2 members of this team failed antibody tests conducted by China. So how did they carry out the probe if they were in quarantine? By holding virtual meetings with their Chinese hosts from a hotel. Can you believe that? For 2 long weeks, this investigation, this global investigation into the origin of the Wuhan virus happened online. Do you know what China did in these 14 days? It rebranded Wuhan, tried to paint the city as the victim of the virus, not the epicenter, as a city that vanquished the virus. Exhibitions were held where China celebrated Wuhan's sacrifice and struggles, the courage of Wuhan's medical staff, how they fought the outbreak. Of course, there was no mention of the whistleblowers who had disappeared, or the people who were hounded for speaking truth to power. We've kept track of them. Ai Feng, Zhang Yongzhen, Li Wenliang, Chen Qixi, Li Zehua, Fan Bing, none of these people were mentioned in these exhibitions that glorify Wuhan and its people. China turned the WHO probe into a charade. It whitewashed people's memories and crime scenes. The WHO officials were allowed to leave quarantine in the end of January, but nobody knows which places they visited clearly or what they saw. Yes, there have been reports, but there's no clarity on who they spoke to or what they did in those places. And in case there were any doubts about the farcical nature of this probe, the WHO press conference today cleared all of them. Their findings, as we say, are path-breaking.
All the work that has been done on the virus and trying to identify its origin continue to point towards a natural reservoir of this virus and similar viruses in bat population. The findings suggest that the laboratory incident hypothesis is extremely unlikely and to explain the introduction of the virus into the human population. We did not find evidence of large outbreaks that could be related to cases of COVID-19 prior to December 19 in Wuhan or elsewhere.
You heard that. The virus is natural. A laboratory incident did not happen, and there's no evidence of an outbreak prior to December 2019. They say that if you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. China is counting on this to happen. Well, we've said this in the past and we'll say it again. This is not a probe, it is a cruel joke on all of us. On Monday, we discussed the future of India's relationship with America, the meaning of American policies and statements for the Indian government. We told you that America will have to find a way to work with India despite the odd disagreement. As we wrapped up our show, we got news that a phone call had taken place between New Delhi and Washington. Prime Minister Narendra Modi had a telephonic conversation with US President Joe Biden. Prime Minister Modi made the announcement on Twitter. He said that they discussed regional issues, shared priorities, cooperation on climate change, their commitment to a rules-based international order, and peace and security in the Indo-Pacific region. The White House and the Press Information Bureau of India have released their respective readouts on the phone call, details of what transpired during the conversation. Let's take it one at a time. One, the White House says that President Biden promised to work closely with India to win the fight against the Wuhan virus. Remember, in 2020, we saw unprecedented cooperation between the two countries in responding to the pandemic. Pharmaceutical companies from both sides collaborated to expand global supplies of critical medicines. Going forward, India and the US are looking to further strengthen this cooperation. Point number two is climate change. It featured prominently in this conversation. The White House says it is looking to renew its partnership with India on the issue, which happens to be a cornerstone of the Biden administration. One of Joe Biden's first decisions as president was rejoining the Paris Climate Accord. He's even appointed a new climate envoy, John Kerry, the former US Secretary of State. In India, Prime Minister Modi has on several occasions highlighted the importance of mitigating climate change. The last instance being the Climate Adaptation Summit held by the Netherlands last month. Also, India's Renewable Energy Ministry is working to ensure that 60% of India's electricity generation comes from clean sources by 2030. There's a lot of common ground there. The third issue which featured prominently in the call was that of a free and open Indo-Pacific, a very important issue, not just for India, but for all the American allies in this region, countries that have been at the receiving end of Chinese aggression, countries like Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Indonesia. They've all been involved in territorial disputes with China throughout 2020 and before. The White House says that in the days ahead, it is looking to cooperate with India in ensuring freedom of navigation and territorial integrity, and to establish a stronger regional architecture in the Indo-Pacific through the Quad. India, being the only member of the Quad that shares a land border with China, will definitely play a key role in America's strategy. And the fourth issue that featured in the talks was terrorism. Again, very important. The White House says it will stand together with India against the scourge of global terrorism. Remember, in recent days, the US has built pressure on Pakistan to keep the killer of American journalist Daniel Pearl, Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, behind bars. In fact, the White House went to the extent of saying that it was outraged at Pakistan's decision. Also, in his first conversation with Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken cut to the chase in pointing out that his administration had its priorities clear. 1, peace in Afghanistan, and 2, the legal case of Ahmad Omar Saeed Sheikh. But coming back to the phone call, it may have happened 3 weeks after Joe Biden became US president, but it has set the dice rolling for the Indo-US ties under a new administration. Usually lofty words like democracy and shared values find mention in joint statements, but the precise nature of the topics discussed says a lot about how this relationship will shape up in the days to come. And any hope that China had of a soft US policy are disappearing fast. So what does Beijing do? Double down on its belligerence. China is sending warships into Japanese waters, spoiling for a confrontation. But the odds are shifting. Biden has signaled his support for the Quad. France has sent a nuclear attack submarine to patrol the South China Sea. The days of Chinese bullying in the Indo-Pacific could be numbered.
China is testing the resolve of the Indo-Pacific axis. It has sailed into Japanese territorial waters for 2 days in a row.
A lot more than just barren rock.
It's a clear violation of Japan's sovereignty. At the center of the row is an island chain in the East China Sea, the Senkakus, controlled by Japan, claimed by China. Chinese vessels have always sailed near the Senkakus, but now they are armed with a new law. It permits the Chinese Coast Guard to use weapons against foreign vessels entering its waters. And that's what they did. 2 Chinese vessels entered the waters around Senkaku. They pointed their bows towards a Japanese fishing vessel. The vessels remained there for almost 9 hours before being warned off by Japanese patrols. Chinese belligerence in this region is not new, but this year there has been a marked increase in the number of incursions. China is testing the waters, both literally and figuratively. In Trump, the Quad alliance had a champion. China wants to see if Biden is equally enthusiastic. Early indications are he is. Biden recently shifted a supercarrier from the Persian Gulf to the Indo-Pacific. There are now 2 supercarriers in the South China Sea. And on Tuesday, they held dual military exercises. China was livid.
The US has frequently sent warships and aircraft to the South China Sea as a show of force, which is not conducive to regional stability and peace. China will continue to take necessary measures to firmly safeguard its national sovereignty and security.
What's even more worrying for China is that the Pacific Alliance is expanding. France seems willing to join the fold. Paris dispatched a navy patrol through the South China Sea, a convoy of 2 ships. One of them, a nuclear attack submarine. But why such a mission? The French defense minister made it clear. But the other side's been busy too. 2 of China's closest allies have kicked off a joint military exercise: Pakistan and Turkey. Their troops have begun training at a special services base in northwestern Pakistan. The exercise includes counter-terrorism, close-quarter battle, cordon and search, rappelling and the works. The world is aligning itself into 2 camps. Ideologically, they could not be further apart. But the question is, what form will this race take?
There is an overwhelming...
A conflict or an extreme competition that President Biden alluded to. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
When the Myanmar military detained lawmakers and seized power, there was one thing that they forgot to account for: the people. The people of Myanmar have refused to yield. They've had a taste of democracy and they're not willing to let go. Over the last 48 hours, the protests have intensified. We're getting reports of gunfire in the capital. Amid all this chaos, the new military ruler came on television. He blamed the politicians and promised elections after 1 year. But the people of Myanmar know better than to trust a general.
Myanmar's military junta has spoken a full week after seizing power in a bloodless coup. It was an exercise in excuses. The general blamed Burmese politicians for subverting democracy. He accused them of rigging the elections, but offered no proof of either.
The military had tried to negotiate according to the law until the last moment. We had kept the public and the world updated through our regular press. The authorities failed to take responsibility. That's why the military had to declare a state of emergency to take care of the democratic system.
As far as justifications for a coup go, protecting democracy is a non-starter. General Min Aung Hlaing promised that the junta wasn't here to stay. He says the army will hold elections after 1 year and hand over power to the victors.
When we have completed 1 year of the emergency law, we will continue to proceed under the 2008 constitution. We will have a multi-party election and we will hand over power to the one who wins in that election.
But the people aren't buying the story of a benevolent junta. And it's understandable why. Last time the military seized power here, they didn't let go for almost half a century. Myanmar's major cities are up in arms, but the generals are not yielding. They've banned protests in Mandalay and Yangon. Dozens are being rounded up and arrested. Peaceful gatherings are being doused with water cannons. In Naypyidaw, there were reports of gunshots. Politically, the clampdown has left Myanmar isolated.
New Zealand is suspending all high-level political and military contact with Myanmar. Minister Mahuta has also directed that New Zealand's aid program to Myanmar should not include projects that are delivered with or benefit the military government. We've also agreed to implement a travel ban to be formalised in the coming week on Myanmar's military leaders.
The United States has reiterated its support to the protesters. The State Department revealed that they had tried to reach out to Aung San Suu Kyi on the day of the coup, but the request was denied. The military claims it's doing all of this for the people, to protect Myanmar's democracy from its politicians. But these scenes tell a different story. Myanmar's 10-year democratic experiment is on the verge of collapse. That is, if it already hasn't. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
South Asia will be at the centre of the competition with China, and India will have a role to play. In recent weeks, New Delhi has reaffirmed its commitment to the neighbourhood by providing vaccine shots. One of the beneficiaries was Afghanistan. Today, the Prime Minister of India held a virtual meeting with the leadership of Afghanistan, promising more development assistance. Here's a report on what happened.
It's a difficult time for Afghanistan. Kabul is fighting terrorists from Pakistan and the virus from China at the same time. And New Delhi wants to help. Earlier this week, Afghanistan received its first consignment of Wuhan virus vaccines from India. A special aircraft carrying 500,000 doses was airlifted to Kabul. Afghanistan is now waiting for emergency approval from the WHO to use them. In a virtual meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Afghanistan's President Ashraf Ghani thanked India. But New Delhi isn't stopping at vaccines.
In the affairs of their neighbors.
On Tuesday, an MOU was signed between India and Afghanistan. It's an agreement to build the Lalandar Dam, also known as the Shatut Dam. Once ready, this dam will supply drinking water to 2 million people in Kabul. Also, water for irrigation to nearby areas.
So this dam comes at a very important juncture of time, at a time that a lot of people in Kabul, they lack drinkable water. So this will provide for more than 2 million people drinkable water. If you have seen the pictures of Kabul, a lot of people live on the mountains, on the top hills. So this will be a very good opportunity for them to have access to drinkable water.
India has put the development of water in Afghanistan first in all its engagements with Kabul. Despite the threat of terrorist attacks to Indian development projects. And it is this terror threat in Afghanistan that was playing on the Indian Prime Minister's mind when he called for an immediate ceasefire in Afghanistan. This is what he told President Ashraf Ghani.
अफगानिस्तान में बढ़ रही हिंसा से हम चिंतित हैं। निर्दोष नागरिकों, पत्रकारों और कार्यकर्ताओं को कायरतापूर्ण ढंग से निशाना बनाया जा रहा है। हमने हिंसा को तत्काल समाप्त करने का आह्वान किया है और हम फौरन एक व्यापक संघर्ष विराम का समर्थन करते हैं।
In response, the Afghan president said that Pakistan was using the Taliban as a tool for maintaining its grip over Afghanistan. While speaking to Prime Minister Modi, he sent this message to Islamabad.
We must ask the world to ask all stakeholders to respect the rules of sovereignty in international relations, stop giving sanctuaries, and stop interfering in the affairs of their neighbors.
While terrorism remains a mutual concern, it hasn't stopped New Delhi from extending development assistance to Kabul. Last year, India announced that it will undertake 100 projects worth $80 million in Afghanistan. In this year's union budget, India set aside 350 crores for Afghanistan. By extending help for a dam project, the Indian government has sent a signal to the region. It remains committed to its neighbourhood for the long term. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
If 2020 was about the Wuhan virus, 2021 will be about big tech. The monopoly of big tech, the unchecked power of big tech, of Facebook, Google and Twitter. Twitter, for one, is becoming a law unto itself. In recent days, it has booted out a world leader, censored tweets it considered inappropriate, and suspended accounts it considered a threat. In India, there are protests underway over the government's new farm laws. Now, the government says certain foreign forces have been trying to hijack these protests on social media, like Khalistani separatists and Pakistan's keyboard warriors. They're trying to amplify misinformation about the farm laws and the protests. In fact, the government of India has identified at least 1,178 such accounts. 1,178, most of which happen to be operating on Pakistani soil. The government says these accounts share provocative content and they pose a threat to public order. It has asked Twitter to block them, but Twitter is yet to act. Forget complying, it seems to be challenging the system. The company has expressed concern about the safety of its employees in India. A Twitter spokesperson has issued a statement saying, and I'm quoting, "Safety of our employees is a top priority for us at Twitter. We continue to be engaged with the government of India from a position of respect and have reached out to Honourable Minister, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology for a formal dialogue. We believe that the open and free exchange of information has a positive global impact and the tweets must continue to flow." When Donald Trump spread misinformation about the US election results, Twitter censored his tweets. When Pakistani bots and Khalistani sympathizers spread misinformation about the Indian farmer protest, Twitter calls it open and free exchange of information. It says, let the tweets flow. How is this fair? Are social media giants answerable to no one? What about the law of the land they operate in? It's a question that Mexico is asking now. The Mexican government has proposed regulating Twitter to protect freedom of expression. A prominent senator has drafted a bill which would grant Mexico's telecom regulator the power to establish a framework for the elimination or suspension of. This move comes just days after Mexican President López Obrador singled out a Twitter employee for his connections with the opposition party. Now, this employee in question once used to be an advisor to an opposition leader. He's now the director of Twitter in Mexico. The Mexican president has said that this compromises the company's ability to be neutral in his country. Good point. Coming back to India, those running Twitter in India are taking decisions that impact 1.3 billion Indians, not just those who are on the platform, but everyone, because misinformation in a charged atmosphere can be dangerous for all. Twitter is fact-checking posts it thinks need to be fact-checked. But who will fact-check the platform? What about their biases, their filters, their political links, if any? All I'm saying right now is Twitter is not beyond biases. Nobody is. And it's certainly not above the law. The platform's monopoly needs to be checked. Everyone needs to be regulated. In the meantime, let's take a look at what's happening in the US. We're talking about a water hack, an age-old siege tactic, which has re-emerged here, but with a cyber twist. A water treatment facility in Florida was targeted by hackers last week. They tried to release large amounts of sodium hydroxide into the town's water supply. 15,000 people could have been affected, but fortunately the attempt was thwarted. Authorities are not taking any chances, though. Both the FBI and the Secret Service are on this case. The question is, does this attack go beyond Florida and beyond the United States of America? Could a foreign power be involved? Here's a report.
It's another lazy Friday in Oldsmar, Florida. A small town with a population of just 15,000. The residents here are settling in for Super Bowl weekend. So are the workers at this water treatment plant, the only one in Oldsmar. But one of the operators soon notices a glitch on his computer. The mouse pointer was moving on its own, and to his horror, it was heading for the control panel. The level of sodium hydroxide or lye was increased from 100 parts per million to 11,100. This was no computer glitch. It was a cyber hack.
After the intruder increased the parts per million from 100 to 11,100, the intruder exited the system and the plant operator immediately reduced the level back to the appropriate amount of 100. Because the operator noticed the increase and lowered it right away, at no time was there a significant adverse effect on the water being treated.
So how did they do it? The hackers gained access to a software called TeamViewer. It is normally used to remotely control a computer. Once the hackers got access to it, the control panel was theirs to regulate. Sodium hydroxide or lye is a common liquid drain cleaner. Exposure in large quantities can cause skin and eye irritation. Consuming it can lead to vomiting, nausea and diarrhea. But authorities say things would never have reached that far.
So that the redundancies that we have in place, they work. But everybody should be on notice. We certainly feel like we're taking a hard look at what we can upgrade and that type of thing to prevent it from happening again. But that lye would have never made it through the process to someone's tap.
As for the culprits, the investigation is still on. Both the FBI and the Secret Service have been roped in. The town's mayor said it was the work of some bad actors. But the sheriff raised an important question. Are these bad actors American, or could they possibly be a foreign hand?
One of the big questions I have is that, and I don't know, again, it's still an ongoing investigation and it's very much active, is that where did it originate from? Did it originate from here in Pinellas County in the state of Florida in the United States or outside the United States?
The attack on Oldsmart's water facility puts the American government on notice. The cyber threat to national infrastructure is real. Hydroelectric plants and water treatment facilities have become easy targets. In 2016, Verizon revealed that there was a cyber attack on an unnamed US water facility. In 2015, 25 American water utilities reported cyber attacks, making it the third most targeted sector in America. Israel too has been on the receiving end. Multiple cyber attacks crippled its water utilities in 2020. Most of them targeted agricultural water pumps. Poisoning the water supply is nothing new. It's a siege tactic as old as warfare itself. With time, the methods may have changed, but not the cruelty of it. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
With that, we are heading into a short break. Up next, Gravitas Images. Thanks very much for watching.
WION now available in the United States. Download the app now.
From the world's most volatile region, conflicts over faith and boundaries,